Dude, this is me, Agent Dave, aka Fanatical for Jesus, aka Don Way, aka David Shue. I'm just coming to you real quick. I want to talk about this is gonna be the next part of my video series on the acronym TULIP and Calvinism, or in Reformed Theology, as I like to call it. This one is gonna be on the I of TULIP, which stands for Irresistible Grace. And I don't really like the term irresistible grace because it kind of gives the idea of God pulling people into heaven, kicking and screaming against their will. So I don't really like that term, irresistible grace. But pretty much all irresistible grace means is that when someone who is of the elect hears the gospel message, God reaches down, takes out their heart of stone, and gives them a heart of flesh, and makes them into a new creation, and then they willingly come to accept the gospel. And this is something that God does alone. Man doesn't participate in this. God acts on man, and man willfully comes into the kingdom. So, as you could tell, these doctrines kind of overlap into each other, and I like this doctrine because it perfectly shows you that it's not salvation isn't in man's hands. Man cannot earn salvation. Man cannot even choose salvation. Salvation is solely of the Lord. And Jesus himself taught irresistible grace when he said that no man can come to him unless the Father draws them. So, no man, it's pretty black and white. No man can come to Christ unless the Father draws them to him. And it's this doctrine has been a topic of contention because people always like to say that man can refuse God's gift of salvation. Which, if you're going to say that man can refuse God's gift of salvation, now you're saying man has autonomy and can thwart the plans of God. You're making man sovereign over God, pretty much, when you say man can refuse God's gift. No, someone who is of the elect cannot refuse God's gift. They will be changed into a new creation, and then they willfully accept God's gift. And it's just such great news. This is why I really love Reformed theology, because it just so perfectly shows how amazing God's grace really is. It really does. To think that God elected anybody to salvation is just phenomenal. Because he didn't have to. He didn't have to elect anybody to salvation. He could have just left us all to our own destructive ways and put us all in hell. And he would still be holy. He would still be just. He would still be merciful. And he would still be loving. And he would still be, and most importantly, he would still be worthy of worship. Even if he would have not elected anybody, he would still be worthy of worship. Because God doesn't need you. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need any of us. So the fact that God elected anybody into salvation is just amazing. It's just an amazing fact. And the thing is, when you reject irresistible grace, or you reject any of these acronyms or these doctrines of TULIP, you are pretty much making man sovereign over God. You're saying that man can thwart the purposes of God, but man can't thwart the purposes of God. Someone who is of the elect will be converted. They will become a Christian. There's no way around it, and because salvation isn't in man's hands, salvation is in God's hands. Because if God didn't act on an individual and just let them be, they would never choose Christ. They would never turn from their wicked ways and come to Christ. So God has to act first on man and make him into a new creation in order for him to experience the joy of salvation, in order for him to willfully accept salvation and accept Christ. So God has to act first on man and change his nature in order for him to become a Christian. So becoming a Christian is actually a supernatural act upon which God changes someone into a new creation, literally into a new creation. This isn't poetry. This is just the truth. Like, it's not poetry, it's a fact. God changes someone into a new creation when he changes them into a Christian. And it's irresistible. Like, the person of the elect cannot resist the purpose of God's will. Just like on the other flip side, someone who is not of the elect can't resist God's will. Someone who is created to be a vessel of wrath cannot resist God's will. And Paul perfectly points this out when he talks about in Romans 9 about some people being made vessels of wrath and some vessels of mercy. He said, who could resist God's will? And he said, but who are you, O man, to answer back to God? So he didn't actually answer the question. He just replied back saying, who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Because none of us is in any moral position to question God. None of us. So regardless of if God creates some people to be vessels of mercy and some people to be vessels of wrath, that's his prerogative. He does what he does because he is God. And we just have to accept it. When you're created to be a vessel of wrath, that's irresistible. You cannot resist God's will. You are what you are. When you're created to be a vessel of mercy, you cannot reject God's will. You are what you are. And it's solely upon God's plan, and it's solely based on God alone what he decides someone's going to be. So, yeah, I know this is going to be offensive to some people. A lot of Christians aren't going to want to accept this, but it's just the truth. It's taught clearly in the Bible. And people just need to, Christians especially need to just accept it and take it for what it is, because God's grace is amazing. Anyway, so that's all I have to say about that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Alright, have a good day. God bless you. And stay awesome, Gotham. Deuces.